For as long as anyone can remember, the American dream meant one thing. You work hard, you save up, and you buy a house. Simple, right? Well, what if that's not the dream anymore? What if for more and more people, the key to getting a home has nothing to do with your paycheck and everything to do with your parents? Something big is shifting under our feet in the housing market, and it really all boils down to one single, kind of shocking number.
18%. Yeah, just let that hang in the air for a second. I know, it doesn't sound like a huge number on its own, but trust me, once you understand what this number is actually talking about, it changes everything we think we know about homeownership, especially when we zoom in on one specific state.
That's it. That's the number, 18%. We're talking about nearly 1 out of every 5 homes that changed hands in California last year. And here's the kicker, they weren't sold. They were passed down, inherited. That's a record high, by the way. Almost 60,000 houses just transferred from parent to child without ever hitting the market. No for sale sign, no bidding wars, nothing.
Okay, but here's where it gets really wild. That 18% in California, it's literally double the national average, which is sitting around 9%. So this isn't just California being a little bit different. No, this is a massive outlier. It's a huge anomaly, which, of course, leads to the big question. Why? What in the world is going on in California that's putting this trend into overdrive?
Well, the answer, as it turns out, is all tangled up in California's, let's just say, unique and pretty controversial history with property taxes. If you really want to get what's happening in the housing market today, you've got to go back, way back, more than 40 years, to a decision that basically changed the game forever.
And this is the absolute core of it. Back in 1978, California voters passed something called Proposition 13. Basically, it capped property taxes at a super low rate and said they could barely increase each year. The only way your property tax bill could jump up to what the house is actually worth today is if you sell it. You can see where this is going, right? It created this massive, powerful reason for people to never, ever sell their homes.
And this whole tax story keeps evolving. Prop 13 kicked things off for sure. But then, more recently, in 2020, another measure called Proposition 19 came along. It tweaked the rules a bit, making it so that heirs usually have to live in the house to keep that sweet, low tax base. But, and this is a big but, it still left enough of a benefit on the table to make inheriting a house a way more attractive option than selling it.
So what you get is this, well, economists have a name for it. They call it the lock-in effect. And it's exactly what it sounds like. People who've owned their homes for a long time are financially locked in. Selling would mean a huge tax bill, so they just don't. And when people don't sell, what happens? Fewer homes on the market. That squeezes the supply, which, you guessed it, drives prices through the roof. Suddenly, inheriting a home isn't just a nice little bonus. For a lot of people, it becomes the only way.
Okay, so we've been focused on California because it's so extreme, right? But what's happening there is really just a supercharged version of something much bigger, a huge economic shift that's actually happening all across the country.
We are right at the start of what people are calling the Great Wealth Transfer. It's a big deal. As the baby boomer generation gets older, a truly mind-boggling amount of wealth is about to be passed down. And a huge chunk of that isn't stocks or cash. It's real estate. We're talking trillions, with a T, trillions of dollars in homes, all set to be handed down to millennials and Gen X.
And look, this affects everybody, not just the people getting a free house. First, it's basically creating a new class of homeowners, right? People who get their property because of who their family is, not what they earn. Second, it messes with the housing supply everywhere because a lot of people who inherit a home don't sell it right away. And maybe the biggest deal of all, it's widening the wealth gap in a huge way. It's creating this massive divide between the property has and the have-nots.
But this isn't just about economics, this is about people. It has this really profound human impact. It's changing the very definition of the American dream. We're not just talking about dollars and cents anymore. We're talking about fairness. We're talking about opportunity.
So that brings us to a really critical question. What does homeownership even mean anymore when the starting line is in a completely different place depending on who your parents are?
Yeah, and this quote from the World Economic Forum just hits the nail on the head. We all know the down payment is the single biggest hurdle, right? It's the mountain you have to climb. So when that money starts coming from the bank of mom and dad instead of your own savings, it does more than just create an economic gap. It creates a social one. It literally splits a generation right down the middle.
So what about the people on the other side of that split? For them, it can lead to this feeling, a new term people are using is financial nihilism.
And it's this idea that traditional goals, like owning a home, are so ridiculously unattainable that why even bother? Why play by the old rules? So you see people either just totally disengage from the system, or they do the opposite. They make these wild, risky bets on meme stocks or crypto, basically hoping to win the lottery.
So this is the reality now. There are two totally separate tracks for people who want to own a home. Path number one is the old-school, competitive, brutal open market. And path number two? It's the quiet, private transfer of wealth from one generation to the next.
Okay, let's bring this back to the here and now. How does all this stuff actually affect the housing market that you're looking at today? Because make no mistake, this isn't some far-off problem for the future. This is actively shaping the number of homes for sale right this second. Yeah, that lock-in effect we talked about, plus this whole inheritance trend, it has a direct, immediate impact on the housing supply. And it really helps explain why the housing market can feel like two different planets depending on where you live. You've got some places that are swimming in listings and other places that are still bone dry.
And this chart shows that split perfectly. Look, on one side, you have these pandemic boom towns, places like Cape Coral in Florida or Austin, Texas. They built a ton, people moved there like crazy, and now things have cooled off, leaving them with more homes for sale than before the pandemic. But then, look at the other side. You have these older, more established regions in the Northeast and the Midwest. They didn't have that crazy boom, and they have way more of that locked-in housing stock we were talking about. The result? Inventory is still incredibly tight, and sellers are still calling all the shots.
So all of this really leaves us with one last and pretty challenging question. The whole idea of the American dream was always built on this promise of upward mobility, that it doesn't matter where you start, you can make it on your own. But if the biggest piece of wealth for most families, their home, becomes something you're given, not something you earn, what happens to that dream? Is it still a dream for everyone, or just for the lucky few?